welcome everyone. I'm Bobby Duffy. I'm Director of the Policy Institute at King's College London, and it is a real pleasure to welcome so many of you here today across FE and HE. It's lovely to see that mix. For this event this session on Future for Higher and Further Education together, jointly with the Education Training Foundation. We have an absolutely brilliant lineup for you to discuss this, and of course in particular we're delighted to have the Minister for Skills, Baroness Jacqui Smith, who we'll hear from first for about 15 minutes, then responding to the Minister for around 5 or 6 minutes each. We'll have a brilliant panel of Professor Rachel Mills, who is Senior Vice President Academic at King's, responsible for our academic strategy and delivery, Dr. Katerina Kolyva, who is CEO of ETF, and then we've got Nick Hillman, who is Director of the Higher Education Policy Institute. He's not Margaret Hodge, who unfortunately couldn't be, no one is Margaret Hodge. No one could ever claim to be Margaret. Unfortunately, he's feeling rather unwell. He's not coming to conference chat this week. So it's good that Nick is here to stand in, actually, because before I hand over to the Minister, I just wanted to flag 3 findings from our latest study on misperception of HE, of the higher education sector, which we did with HE, and lots of you will have copies on your chairs. And I love misperception studies. I've done them more or less all my career, and they're not about tricking people or trying to point out how wrong or dumb they are. They're incredibly useful tools for understanding the impressions that people have of issues, of sectors, and clues to their concerns and what we can do about them. You can see that in people's overestimates of immigration, thinking that crime rates are going up when lots of crime rates are going down, all those types of things. So first, actually, I'm going to ask you one of the questions that we asked the public, which is always dangerous in an audience like this. So what percentage, this is about graduate regret, what percentage of graduates do you think they say they choose not to go to university if they had that choice again? This is where I've realised giving you the booklet with the answers, maybe not the smartest approach to a quiz, but then no one reads the booklets anyway, so it's fine. Anyone want to guess what percentage of graduates wouldn't go to uni if they had the choice again?
8%.
8%, thank you. Eunice has read. The report is actually 8%. But the guess, that's not the guess among the public. The average guess among the public is 40%. The median guess is that 40% of graduates regret going to university, which is just not true. Then on debt, the actual proportion of graduates who say that the debt they ran up during their university years has negatively impacted their lives is 16%, which is too high. That is true, but it's nothing like the public perception. You think that half of graduates would say that the debt has negatively impacted their lives. And obviously, 16% is too high. It's actually higher for more recent graduates at 22%. So the announcements on maintenance grants, very interesting in the past week, and I'm sure we'll get onto that in discussion. And that maintenance grant money seems to be coming from international student levy, and I think, again, that will come up in discussion, I'm sure. And just one other question on this kind of theme. International students are a much bigger export than we think. So we asked the general public, which one of these sectors do you think brings most into the UK in terms of exports? This type of list: aircraft manufacturing, telecoms, county services, legal services. And people put HE in third place, but it's actually the top export out of all of those types of industries, and massively so. 25 billion a year export industry, more than twice the next biggest study, next biggest sector. And finally, though, it's clear that HE is not the full answer to all our skills needs, and that's why we're so keen to do this joint HE-FE study in the public sector. And you can see that in a really simple question that we just asked people, whether we asked parents of teenagers whether they would prefer their child to go to university to do a degree or to do an apprenticeship when they became 18. It splits parents pretty much in half. 48% of parents say they would like their kids to do an apprenticeship, 40% say university degree, and that is actually the public perception as well. When you ask the public to guess what parents would think, they split in half too. So public and parents are pretty much aligned on this. There is no misperception there. Now, there's obviously much more to technical and vocational education than apprenticeships, and universities themselves do much more technical and vocational training than people are aware of, and we might come on to that in the discussion. But I think the main message from all of this is from the public's perspective. We need to think of it much more as a system than we've succeeded in doing in the past. People see the connections between these things. We really don't need to devalue or undermine one option to boost the other. Instead, we need to focus on higher and further education can work together, which is the focus for the session today. And with that, I'm going to hand over to the Minister.
Bobby, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for making me not have to walk through a rainstorm as we did for this similar event last year. And thank you particularly for focusing today on that really important relationship between the skills system, FE, and HE. Absolutely at the heart of the way which I have to think about my job. And it's a pleasure as well to see so many leaders from universities, colleges, business and local government in one room, because that's exactly how we intend to run the skills system together. And just to start with something personal, but I think important. Obviously, earlier this month, my brief expanded. I now report across the Department for Education and the Department for Work and Pensions. And that dual reporting isn't a sort of quirk of Whitehall. It is a statement of intent. It reflects a simple truth that at the heart of our approach, skills policy only works when it connects education and employment, learning and labour markets and productivity and people's lives. And you can't grow the economy without growing people's skills, and you can't grow people's skills in a vacuum forced from the jobs and sectors that need them. So we're wiring the system to make that connection by design, not by chance. And our mission today is productivity and growth through a modern, responsive post-16 system. And that means three things: place-based upskilling, so working with local businesses, mayors, civic leaders to meet the needs of regional economies. It means a flexible tertiary system, bridging the academic-vocational divide with routes that make sense for real learners and real employers, and clarity and coherence, ending a decade of fragmentation so that universities, colleges and providers can pull in the same direction. And I'm happy to talk about financial pressures in the higher education sector because we aren't ducking that issue. But I do want to be equally clear about the opportunity in front of us, how higher and further education together can deliver the skills landscape we're setting out in the forthcoming white paper. So where are we as we go into that? Thinking first of all about the strengths of the system. Our universities are world class. They are engines of discovery. They're magnets for investment. They're anchors for local economies, and they're ladders of opportunity for young people and adults alike. Our colleges are embedded in their communities, quick to respond to changing labour markets, central to social mobility, providing opportunities at a crucial stage, which are fundamental, particularly to young people's lives, but also to adults throughout their working lives. But we do understand that the pressures are real. Many universities are facing acute financial strain, and we've been honest about that, and I hope practical. We're working closely with the Office for Students to prioritise stability and to protect students and the wider public interest. We took the decision this year to increase the maximum tuition fee, and we will have more to say about ongoing financial stability for the higher education sector. But that is only the start. The wider answer to the sector's pressures is not simply more of the same. It is a system that rewards relevance, supports flexibility and values partnership. On the demand side, the picture is also clear. We do have in Britain a chronic skills mismatch. In manufacturing alone, and I've just come from a session on manufacturing skills, tens of thousands of roles remain unfilled. A significant share are hard to fill because applicants lack the right blend of technical and transferable skills. And that's before we get on to the future-looking challenges, where in fast-growing sectors, clean energy, digital and AI, life sciences, defence, we hear the same refrain that we could grow faster if we could recruit faster. And across the country, too many young people, roughly 1 in 8, are still not in education, employment or training, and that's lost potential and lost growth. And of course, Pat McFadden had and Rachel Reeves important things to say about our youth guarantee yesterday. So the question is not whether we need a more modern joined-up skills system. The question is how quickly we can build it and how we use the strength of both higher and further education in order to do that. So the answer starts with some clarity about where the gaps are and a more focused and directed system. That's the reason for the establishment of Skills England, the national body we've stood up to bring clarity and coherence, to provide one authoritative view of current and future skills needs, to make sure training effort lines up with our industrial strategy, and to convene employers and mayors at trade unions, colleges and universities and government around real data and real outcome. And that matters for universities in terms of providing that picture, but also in terms of the engagement that I hope that higher education will be able to have with Skills England. Secondly, that flexible tertiary system. I think you're absolutely right, Bobby, that is the case that too often we think that there are two worlds, academic or vocational, and real lives don't work like that. Employers need people who mix theory with application. Learners increasingly want to move in and out of study as their careers develop, and I think there are two important reforms here: the growth and skills levy and the flexibility it provides, and the ability, of course, to fund level 4, 5 and degree apprenticeships through that, but also, of course, the lifelong learning entitlement from 2027, allowing adults to access modular, stackable learning with maintenance support, whether delivered by a university, a college, or an independent provider. And that means a new culture of learning, working, a system that meets people where they are and helps them to move forward. I think it's an enormous opportunity, a potential challenge for universities to think about designing provisions that will meet the LLE criteria, and more importantly will enable us to think about how we fill that level 4, 5 gap, the missing middle that is a particular challenge in this country, how we expand higher technical qualifications, how we develop modular professional learning. And I do know that that is a challenge for government and our thinking as well, in terms of making sure that we're linking together our skills thinking and our LLE policy development. A third, as I say, we're serious about place. A modern skills system has to be local and national. That's why we've continued with local skills improvement plans. We will want higher education to have an even greater role in that sort of local discussion about priorities and how they can be met. Devolution isn't an excuse for fragmentation. It is a tool for responsiveness, and another of Skills England's role will be to make sure that that local flexibility adds up to national coherence and links to that. We have considerable additional investment going into sector skills packages, targeting capacity where it's needed. The £625 million construction skills package, expanding use into skilled trades, developing technical excellence colleges in FE, an engineering package of over £100 million to grow technicians and engineers, a defence skills package, working with the Ministry of Defence as part of the Defence Industrial Strategy, with a very important element not only of FE investment, particularly through Defence Technical Excellence colleges, but also the Defence University Alliances, recognising that this is an industry in which many of the skills that will be required will be those being delivered through universities, and that partnership will be crucial. And then the digital and AI package, including a government industry partnership to train millions of workers in essential AI skills by 2030, but also, of course, targeted support for graduates and researchers in AI, cybersecurity and computer science. All of this is, if you like, the infrastructure that we're putting in place. So what does that mean in practice? It means our creative industries, for example, one of Britain's great comparative advantages, where universities and colleges are already co-designing courses with employers in screen, gaming, design and digital effects, providing industry placements, running degree apprenticeships and opening doors for a more diverse cohort of students. It means health and social care partnerships between universities, colleges and NHS trusts, vital to expanding the workforce in all its range. As I saw at the University of Worcester last week, with placements, simulation facilities, new progression routes that reflect the reality of modern care. And I've already talked about manufacturing and the need to ensure that we're filling that missing middle, those technicians, those supervisors that will be so crucial and so needed. And of course, it has to work for learners as well. And we have talked, I have talked previously, and there's more work I know we need to do on how we make sure the right information, advice and guidance is out there, how we make sure that students don't only enter our colleges and universities, but also are supported to succeed whilst they're there, and supplied with the employability advice and skills to get good jobs at the end of their time studying. So there are a series of asks then here in the months ahead. How can universities in particular lead on relevance, map your portfolio to sector and regional demand? How can we develop that flexibility necessary to build modular pathways to ensure that we're delivering those level 4 and 5 skills, to create step-on, step-off routes that let people learn and work? Thirdly, of course, how can you be anchors for place, responding to local priorities and needs, working with partners locally? How can you open doors and help people to walk through them by strengthening outreach and schools partnerships and adult returner routes? How can you treat partnership as a core capability and reach out beyond higher education to the whole range of other partners that will be important for this work? And of course, what you should and I hope can expect from the government is clarity through Skills England, further support through the white paper, which will come soon, I promise. More certainty around stability and financial sustainability. The engagement about the opportunities and the design of the LLE, investing where it counts, for example, in those sector skills packages, devolving with purpose to support that local and regional infrastructure and environment. And none of this, of course, is about the government writing your timetables, but it is about setting a clear direction and then partnering with you to deliver it. And just if we're successful in this, what is it that is at stake? Well, it's a system in which we change people's lives. The young person who never thought that university was for them earns, say, level 4 qualification in a university college partnership and steps into a good job. The mid-career worker takes 2 LLE modules and moves into a higher paid role in a growing sector. A local employer who's been advertising the same vacancy for months finally finds that skilled person and could bid for new contracts. A region that has seen too many of its young people leave suddenly finds that it can train, keep and attract talent because its colleges and universities are working together to be engines of growth. And when all of that happens, we grow the economy, we rise productivity, we develop the good jobs and lifelong opportunities for people that I suspect all of us are in this room to deliver. That's the challenge. It's also the opportunity, and I'm really looking forward to both the conversation and the work that I know that we'll all be engaged in to make that a reality.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jacqui. That was excellent. And we got a welcome break from Steve's music from outside, which is lovely. Well, I spoke too soon. I now jinxed it. I'm going to hand over to Professor Rachel Wills.
Thank you everyone for coming, and it's a pleasure to be here as the Senior Vice President Academic at King's College London. The room is really full, and I think that shows how much higher education and further education is important to all of us. Jacqui's laid out really clearly what the challenges are, what's going to be asked of us, so I'm just going to make a few reflections from the King's and hopefully on behalf of the sector. And so I think we are at a defining moment. We always say this, but I really think this in my career. We're at a defining moment for my sector, certainly. And I think, first of all, I want to commit, as from King's, from the Russell Group, from the whole higher education sector, that we will deliver that opportunity for our young people. We will deliver that innovation that will drive growth, and we will deliver the outcomes that are needed for society and opportunity for all. And we're really committed to that at King's. And I'm going to give you some examples about how we do that, but hopefully it will resonate across all of the leaders from higher education in the room, but perhaps you can come in when we have the conversation. As universities, we rely on our relationship with partnerships. There's partnerships abroad, whether they're partnerships with government, they're partnerships with FE, partnerships with employers, partnerships with parents, partnerships with students, partnerships with society as a whole. And partnerships really underpin the way we work, and we need to bring that forward and work more closely together. And I think the together word in our title today is one that I think we need to remember. That is the message. If we work together across the boundaries of government, higher education, and further education, and through our partnerships, we can do so much more together. And Jacqui's already mentioned the skills for the NHS that are essential for our future. We at King's develop that workforce at every level. And those skills for healthcare are really important. The skills for public and private sector are really important. Upskilling with AI at a pace that I've never seen before is really important. Upskilling for innovation, upskilling for growth. And so that's absolutely in the front of our strategies across the sector. But I want to say again, we're part of a connected and interconnected ecosystem that needs to feed off each other, and the sum needs to be more than the parts. We must stop that competition between each other and work together. We need to design those interventions together. We need to look at the evidence, which interventions work, and then we need to roll those out at pace and at scale. Now, we know that the barriers to entering higher education are not financial in part, and we know that because the students tell us this when they come. They work long hours while they're trying to study. And so I'm sure we're going to be talking about that return to financial support through maintenance grants. But I think we need to be really careful about thinking about the rollout and implementation and what works and what doesn't work, and we need to work together on those solutions. And the one thing I want to start by saying is that financial support for students won't work on its own. We know from our decades of work at King's that meaningful shift in terms of access to higher education comes from connecting with individuals in our community. It comes from building trust between parents and students and the next generation of students, and building those bridges into our community in South East London. We've now reached out to Luton, and we've now reached out to coastal communities. It's building those bridges that are real and personal that make a difference. And so our programme, which we call K+, has been doing this for a decade and has demonstrably made a difference to that access to higher education. Our Parent Power scheme has demonstrably made a difference to higher education entrance. And I just wanted to flag one low-cost project that was covered in the press last week, where our students from matched backgrounds reach out and write letters to children in schools from deprived areas, making meaningful connection at a personal level, showing the access route into higher education. And the wonderful evidence from your Policy Institute shows that these letters have led to an uplift in applications from these areas by 4%. And that is demonstrable and is now being rolled out across 10,000 individuals by DFE. And so it's these interventions that need to match that financial support, and we need to think about that ecosystem approach. Well, we showed us a slide which talked about that sort of dichotomy, or that binary choice of apprenticeship versus a degree. And again, I want to say that we at King's think it's much more of a spectrum. All of our students that come to King's are asking for those authentic, employment-related opportunities, whether it's placements, whether it's internships, whether it's volunteering in the local community, whether it's bringing the community and employers to us and those professional clinics we offer, whether it's mentorship schemes with our alumni, whether it's development of individuals we can see are going to be future leaders. It's a whole range of things, and I think we need to stop thinking about it as an either or, and that the higher education system is offering a wide range of authentic and real experiences within the curriculum, outside the curriculum, that are connecting ourselves with our partners so that we have work-ready graduates who can go on to fantastic careers. I think this, again, is going to be part of that dialogue, moving away from thinking about things as binary choices. And so we're partnering with our innovation ecosystem. That innovation ecosystem goes right across London through to our international partners. Our students get access to that innovation ecosystem, whether it's through our Entrepreneurship Institute, and it's there that we'll create the future leaders that will be able to drive the growth that we need. And so we need to think of these solutions in a joined-up way. And ultimately, all of this leads to that social mobility we so much want to see, that geographical mobility we so much want to be, and the future that we all want.
Delighted to be here, and great to see so many of you interested in this theme of working together. And really great to hear from the Minister that message of together working as engines of growth, and that opportunity of higher, further skills to be working as one and offering opportunities to all those we serve. I suppose I'm going to share some data in a second, but before I do that, I was really interested in your misconceptions and public perceptions, and if we were to do this for further education skills, what would that look like? I was just thinking maybe a piece of work for the future probably, but a couple for me. How many of us in the room think that further education skills is for younger people over the age of 16? It actually goes all the way to retirement, to if we are still here at 116 and still learning, further education skills will be there for us. And the second one, perhaps, for us to consider is subject areas. Maybe, again, further education skills we think is about construction, hospitality, beauty, and we don't necessarily think engineering, digital, space, green, energy, and healthcare. So there's something about, or professional services, there's something about thinking of those perceptions, misconceptions, and actually understanding that whole ecosystem. And you talked about ecosystems, and I think we will have succeeded when we stop talking about further and or higher education and we just talk education. And of course, this is a step bit forward, but I think that essence of working together is critical. I promised you some data. The further education skills sector is very much a story of social mobility and diversity. And in 22-23, the total number of learners in the sector in the UK were about just over 3 million, including 2.6 million learners in England. And that sector supports a disproportionate number of learners with special needs from disadvantaged backgrounds, and a third of those students coming from 20% of the most deprived areas of England. And I hope we all know that story, but the better story is how they succeed and how they progress in their careers and into employment. I suppose another good story is the female students being 55% and 50 being less than 30 years old, with 69% of male learners in the FE being under 30 years of age. So there's something about that kind of graphic of the story it tells us. I agree that together is the most important theme of today's discussion, and I hope we'll get more input and thoughts from our audience. But if we want to collaborate for impact, I think there are 3 ways that we can do that, working together. One, around creating those clear pathways you talked about, from education and training into employment, career information, clear communication is part of that success, so that people understand what options they have and what opportunities they have. Sometimes we give them more of one rather than the other. Some regulatory and financial levers, I think we're all clear about those, and the promotion of parity of esteem and raising the profile, talking the further education skills up rather than down, and all of us need to be doing that together as great places to learn and great places to work. My interest and our interest at ITF is very much around workforce, because we are the professional development body with 23,000 people on our register that work in FE and skills. So for us, there are three key areas of focus in the lens we bring to this discussion. One, that we want to make sure that every learner, irrespective of what they study, where they study, what age they are, what their demographic is, they are trained and supported to the highest and consistent standards across the country. Our second one is about every region having the data, the focus of the funding and the capacity to be able to deliver local skill needs, because they are local. National needs will not be consistently applied across regions. And finally, every learner being taught by professionals, by teaching, training, coaching, assessors, leaders that are highly skilled, valued, and vocationally expert. I'll pause here and invite you all to kind of read our key asks and analysis in our Powering the Government's Missions document, and hand over to Bobby. Thank you.
Right, so keep testing. Yep.
Thank you very much, Bobby, and thank you for inviting me to speak here. I'm sorry I'm not. Margaret Hodge, who of course is a wonderful speaker and very experienced governor and former Minister of Higher Education. So, but my name is Nick Hillman. I head up HEPI, the Higher Education Policy Institute, which is an Oxford-based think tank, and we've done work with King's College Policy Institute, as Bobby said. First thing I want to say is how wonderful the King's College Policy Institute is. Indeed, it is a trailblazer, really, for a whole series of new policy institutes across universities up and down the UK, quite a lot of which are here in Liverpool, University of Leicester, Institute of Policy, for example, Policy at Manchester. And it's really fantastic, I think, to see universities engaging directly with the policy debates in perhaps a more direct way than has always been the case in the past. Bobby introduced a piece of work we did together, so I'm not going to talk about the results of that, other than in a couple of respects to say the reason this work happened, and I must admit King's did most of the work, but I think Bobby would say the original idea was ours, and it came to me because I had a pint in a pub with a neighbour of mine, and he had spent his entire career in banking, so he understood finance, and he had two graduate children, so hopefully he understood the value of education. And he was slagging off universities. He was saying there are too many universities, there are too many students, all the sort of regular right-wing tropes we hear about universities. And I said to him, but do you realise how important they are to the country? And he sort of equivocated. So I said, I'm on the board, I'm not anymore, but I was then, I'm on the board of the University of Manchester. Guess what its turnover is? And he said, I don't know, 30 million? Now, for those people who don't know, the turnover of the University of Manchester is 1.3 billion. It's equal to Manchester City and Manchester United income put together. And it got me thinking, I know someone who knows about misperceptions, because Bobby's done lots of other great work on misperceptions, and it led to this piece of work. And Bobby mentioned lots of the results. There's lots of other very interesting results in there. One of them, actually, is people think tuition fees have been going up in line with inflation year after year, where of course they haven't. Only two ministers have been brave enough to increase tuition fees since 2012. One was Joe Johnson and one was Jacqui Smith. So, albeit some of that money's going in the national insurance rise, but nonetheless, and I hope when the skills paper comes out, as it will soon, as we heard, that it might have a commitment to further increases to tuition fees, because that is the resource that's spent on people's education. I personally would like to see inflation plus for a few years to catch up a little bit with the shortfalls that have accrued. But the title today, as we've heard, is The Future of Higher Education and Skills, together. And there are clearly benefits to the sort of joined up thinking that this session is all about, as we've heard. I mean, I think, for example, about alternative routes to higher education. I do hope that BTECs will survive the current policy ructions. The previous government wasn't a big fan of them, and I hope they survive the lifetime of this government, despite T levels being there alongside. I hope we can have further expansion in things like degree apprenticeships, which are another way of acting together. And I completely agree that we need to make sure university courses are delivering the skills employers and students need. I mean, if you say to students, what is the primary reason why you went to higher education, the top result in every poll of that question I've ever seen says to get a fulfilling career afterwards. It's not necessarily to be a millionaire or be rich, it's to have a rewarding and fulfilling career. So we do need different routes. And the last time Jacqui and I shared a platform together was at the launch of the OECD's Education at a Glance data, which does show that in the UK we're very good at higher level skills, but the big failing is some of the other 50%, particularly people who currently leave school without even level 3 qualifications, A-levels or BTECs, and that is where we need to do a whole lot more, as Jacqui rightly implied. But I do worry a bit. I mean, Jacqui is the Minister for Skills, and we do have a much more joined up approach than we did between FE, HE, etc. But as in so many things in life, the greatest strength is also the greatest weakness, because we've lost something too. I mean, I used to work in Whitehall for one of Jacqui's predecessors, and in those days, the teaching and learning functions of universities and the research functions of universities had one minister in one department with one regulator/funder. And of course, the one consequence of being more joined up on skills is less joined upness elsewhere in the system. And I do think we need to bear that in mind, particularly between teaching and research. And I worry, Jacqui, and I'd be interested to get your reflections on this, that the recent machinery of government changes might have made it harder, not easier, to bring around the clarity and coherence that you mentioned. I mean, for example, if you're a university wanting to work with Skills England, and the Labour manifesto said universities should be working with Skills England, now the Skills England is resident in the DWP, not the Education Department, it might just be an extra obstacle, an extra hurdle, an extra challenge, so I'm intrigued to know how that plays out. And then finally, can I mention the elephant in the room, the announcement yesterday, maintenance grants paid for by the levy. I mean, I'm a very strong supporter of maintenance grants. I thought they should not have been abolished. I said that at the time, in an article in The Guardian, and I've said it multiple times in the 10 years since. The government I worked for, the coalition government, didn't abolish maintenance grants. There was something that happened just after that. It's absolutely wrong that the poorest students leave higher education with the largest debts. So I'm a big supporter of that. But and I get the politics of bringing back something that's very popular, a grant, and funding it with something that's unpopular, the levy, at least unpopular on universities, and in the hope they neutralise one another. It reminds me from the previous government was doing its rather controversial sort of market-based reforms of higher education, and decided to choose call the market regulator the Office for Students, because everybody likes students, but even if they didn't like the reforms. But Vivian Stern, head of UK, has a nice line where she says international student fees used to be the icing on the cake. They used to allow universities to do things they might not otherwise have done, but they weren't absolutely fundamental and core to everything that a university does. And I do worry that, we are now putting, as well as the deficit on research, which is in one of Bobby's reports on your seats, and the shortfall in the teaching costs of home students, we're now going to add the rent and the living costs of some UK students onto those fees of international students too. And we had a lady from East Africa at one of our fringe meetings yesterday who talked about how people in countries that she works in, such as Uganda, she literally knew people who had sold their home to enable to afford their children to come and study in the UK HE system. And so I have some ethical questions around whether it's the right way to fund the return of maintenance grants, even though I think we should all absolutely 100% welcome the return of maintenance grants, and hopefully to even more courses than the ones they were announced for yesterday. Many thanks.
Thank you so much. So I think we've got the minister till 10 past, and then a hard stop at 10 past. So I think my people, we will go to that. And we're going to take questions 2 or 3 at a time. We've got a microphone. If you can say who you are, ask your question. Given we've only got 20 minutes or so, keep it tight.
Thanks very much. My name's Andy McGowan. I'm from Carers Trust, a national carers charity that does a lot of work around access to education opportunities for young carers. There's lots of partnerships there, and I was just wondering in terms of actually your thoughts on how we can get partnerships even more with sort of social care, health, the voluntary sector, to remove some of those non-financial barriers. So, for example, young carers, actually the fact that they're providing significant knowledge to family members means going on to further education isn't an option. So I just wanted to sort of focus on that.
Yeah. Excellent question. Thank you, Baroness.
Perfect. Thank you. Simon Backerton, Chief Executive of the Workers' Educational Association. We're the largest statutory funded provider of adult learning across England and Scotland. Jacqui, delighted that ASF, Adult Skills Fund, has stayed in your portfolio. Just looking for a reassurance, really, with the move to DWP, a big part of the Adult Skills Fund tailored learning, which for the room is that learning that's available to anybody over the age of 90 to build confidence, some family learning, help build stronger communities. Can you reassure us that tailored learning will still be part of the Adult Skills Fund and won't be lost in the understandable drive of skills for jobs?
But stuff though. Yes, directly behind you. Down.
Thank you. Gordon Keithman from the University of the West of England in Bristol. We welcome, obviously, encourage working across all sectors, and that's the DNA of our university. Yet so much of the time and work we spend is dependent on a competitive bidding process. One day writing leads to secure funding to the detriment of our neighbours, but at the same time we encourage to work together, projects such as the Institute of Technology. It'd be really interesting to know and have your reflections on this and indicate if that's like to continue, please.
Okay, well, let's take those three through the room as we get the next round. Jacqui, coach you first.
So Andy, first of all, on the young carers point, which if I just link it to some of the broader points that Rachel was also making about access, it is a real, it has been one of the pillars that we have set for higher education reform, that we improve both the access and participation of students, and we help students to overcome some of the barriers that they are facing. And there's a whole range of really good work going on. I know about that. But there is also, in terms of disadvantage, a persistent gap that we haven't yet managed to close. So we are very open to, practical, as I know will individual institutions be, the suggestions about the practical barriers that are preventing people from getting the education in FE or AG that they would need to have. And we will want to do more on not just saying that there's good practice out there in access and participation, but actually try to corral that a bit more, determine what is actually working and where the impact is, and make more of that as part of our whole work going into the future. Simon, on the WA, and thank you for not understandably complaining to me about cuts in. I'm over it. No, neither of us are over it. And hopefully, anyway. Of course, we will want to in DWP we will want to think about what the focus of funding is. But Pat has been very clear about the opportunity that comes from shifting skills into DWP to broaden DWP's sort of view of its role as well, from simply a you're in work or you're not in work into a much more skills-oriented, good quality work, upskilling within work, and I think some of those things like tailored learning, which of course brings you, it's likely to bring you closer to the labour market, but of course not only designed to that, but it's really, really important for that. And then finally, Guy's point, it's where we can, I wasn't responsible for IoTs, I wasn't responsible for technical excellence colleges, and we did expect people to bid as part of that. And it's always a challenge in government to think about what's the best process for distributing money when you want to identify some particular areas to do it. But I hear your point about bidding, and particularly given that I'm always banging on about collaboration. We need, even if we're expecting people to bid, I think we need to expect that to be done in collaboration, getting people working together to try to put forward their preferred option, and I will keep thinking about it.
Thanks, Dan.
Andy, thank you for your point on partnership working with the voluntary charity sector. from NITEC's perspective, I would say that obviously we have seen that from the perspective of employment, engagement, placements, in particularly the work we're doing with workforce development and support in T-levels, for example. There's been a lot of partnership working in that. But I wonder whether there is also opportunity to work more closely with voluntary organisations and charities in workforce, in supporting those candidates to get into teaching and get into those careers. So perhaps something we can pick up on.
I was just going to come in and say it's about those individual connections, and that's the point I was making. It's about doing sort of realistic distribution of finance is one thing, but we need those individual connections that marriage to that lived experience of that person and build that healthy all the way in, put that whole wrapper in. And so one size does not fit all, and we recognise that, and we have some experience doing those interventions at King's that we need to spread across the sector. And then back to the point about inefficiencies, of multiple ways of bidding for funding at success rates that are down at 10%. It's really inefficient use of talent, and we absolutely need to move beyond that. And again, if we can think about being joined up, that would be super.
I'm happy to sit this one out, Bobby. Guess some more questions.
Yeah, very, very good. There's Evelyn, whatever, actually. Kind of medicate.
Thanks. I'm Evelyn Welsh, Associate of the University of Bristol, sitting here with the Chancellors PLC Leicester and Bath. All of us, of course, work very closely with our local FE colleges and sixth form colleges, and indeed all the way down to primary schools. We're very proud of that. So, I hope you won't underestimate the shift that we're making, or that we're attempting to make, from more than 10, 15 years of a market-based competitive environment to a partnership, collaborative working. This really builds on the UE comments before. And is the best approach specialisation, focus, so everyone does the thing that they're really best at and then finds articulation points? Or are we looking at, HE or universities to actually reach down and start their own further education colleges? What's the best outcome in terms of a new vision for a new system?
Great question. Thank you. And there's a guy at the back, right at the back. Oh, there you go.
Hi, I'm Shane from FE Week. I've got a question about the pipeline into industry and higher education. It follows on from a point that Nick made earlier. Year 11s at school now are thinking about their options for next year, and there's about 50 level 3 applied general qualifications that are currently on a list to be funded. Many of them are the BTECs that Nick referenced. So I'd like a categorical decision from the minister, if possible. Is the door closed on defunding? Has that decision been made, cemented and final? Or is there an option, is there a possibility that those options, because T-levels aren't growing as fast as we expected them to and the government expected them to, is there an option for those qualifications to continue for a little bit longer?
Thanks so much, Shane. And good with some of the one. Yeah, so yep.
Thank you. What is in the title, Future of Higher Education Skills Together? There's something to pick up in that. Was one of the biggest mistakes been made in higher education policy in recent years was that it moved on the what's called the student wonder trap. What that did was it basically capped numbers on the courses at different universities. Now, that cap removal has meant that, particularly Russell Group universities, but certainly universities who lack higher up the university pecking order, have vastly increased the number of students that they're taking on courses that reasonably cheap, like history, politics, international relations, sociology, these kinds of things that they'd be options. And reducing the number of students in other parts, in other universities. This has played a major role, first of all, in fueling the financial crisis in many universities outside of us. My point here really is that what the impact of that has been is to create a kind of desert in parts of the country, particularly for arts and humanities or social science subjects, because there simply aren't enough students in the system for the arts and humanities and social science to recruit when so many of the students are going to like the Greek University. And this is like should be one of the later was concerned about. It's an argument about inclusion and about opportunity, because many students, many parts of the country, are being denied the opportunity to do these courses because they're not available universities. They're not the most people in them. That industry should be, say, living at home, but going to university. And that they can't do that because those courses are
Great.
we're cut against you.
So, on Evelyn's point, yes, it is a big shift from a shift to partnership, a shift to collaboration, from a focus on competition. And, Patrick Valence and I have thought about and have talked about, and we'll have more to say about what we think that means for the nature of the HE sector, where I think we should, one, recognise diversity, two, celebrate that, not expect every institution to be delivering exactly the same, and encourage institutions to think about their specialisms and focus on them. What that doesn't mean, I don't really think, Evelyn, I don't know, perhaps you did mean that HE should stomp all over Effie's ground. No, because that's what some FE principals think you mean sometimes. So, no, I think actually what we need to see, particularly with FE and HE, is playing to their strengths, doing their thing, but thinking about how they work together in order to make that make sense for individual students finding their way through the system, and the way in which resources are most effectively spent in an area. And by the way, I think that would be a better way of ensuring that we didn't have the sorts of deserts that the last gentleman was talking about. Of course, I share your concern about where there are areas where there are not courses that are available to people, and one of the reasons for making the system more sustainable, for encouraging this collaboration, is to prevent that from happening. However, I don't think the answer, first of all, I don't think it would work to say you can't study X, there go off and study arts and humanities. I just don't think that would work. But secondly, I don't think we should, I do believe that students should have a choice about what they study and where they study it, informed by better and more transparent information about what they're going to be getting when they get to university and what they're likely to be able to achieve at the end of it. But I would want to introduce some of the, so that's why I just don't support the idea that we would reintroduce student number caps. And then Shane, nice try. How very conservative some people are about the current system of qualifications. But I've been completely clear that I think T-levels have got an important role to play, A-levels have got an important role to play, and we have the need then for a third route in the middle. We'll have more to say about that, and that I think will provide the sort of choice that those wanting to protect something that they've got at the moment are doing it for.
Careful.
Very much agree with the Minister that we have to move forward as working together rather than trying to tap into each other's territories. We've done a bit of that, to be fair, in some areas. In my view, there are two areas that we may want to focus on. The obvious one is progression. So how do we make sure that everybody progresses and succeeds in whatever they want to do, growing as individuals? The second one I would suggest is research, and how do we get academic research to then work between higher and further education in terms of applied research and practitioner-based research. And there is some good practice happening in the education and teacher training space, I know for that. So there are opportunities there as well. And finally, I wonder whether we need to look a little bit outside to what's happening in other countries, how vocational, technical, higher further education systems work across Europe and more broadly. Huge opportunity coming up with working more closely with Europe. We've got already Horizon partnerships, obviously looking for the UK to enjoy hopefully Erasmus Plus, and as we do that, how can we look to other countries to learn, share, and use best practice from them?
Great. And you can George.
Well, briefly respond to the last gentleman, then pass over to Nick. I don't recognise the description of what happened since the student number cap came off. I think if we look at King's, where our growth has been, it's been through innovating the new programmes that cut right the way across arts and humanities, social sciences, into STEM. And that's where the growth has come from, is not by filling up our old-fashioned single-discipline subjects. And so we've pivoted by innovating in the curriculum and providing things that actually the students, the employers and society need. I mean, Nick is the expert here, so I'm going to hand to him.
Well, there'll be people in the room who vehemently disagree with me, but the proudest thing I've ever done in my whole career was help the ministers in charge at the time remove student undercaps. I think it's a wonderful policy removal, because I think we now have two things that didn't used to happen. We used to literally turn people away from higher education because the number cap was not only on individual institutions, it was on the sector as a whole, and there were tens of thousands, arguably hundreds of thousands of young people applying to go to higher education who wanted to go and whom universities wanted to let in, who were simply not being offered a place at all. And so when we got rid of the numbers cap, it's at a macro sector level as well as an institutional level, and we do now have more students, a higher percentage of applicants getting their first choice place, possibly than ever, but certainly in living memory. And I think those are wonderful things. I do recognise the concern in the question. I've got two teenage children, and it worries me that they push people towards Russell Group universities simply because they're in the Russell Group. They don't. If I said to the teachers, do you even know exactly who's in the Russell Group? I'm not sure they would know. And I welcome the government getting rid of the school accountability measure of how many of your kids go into Russell Group. I think that's a very useful thing to do. I think there are problems of demand for higher education. There are universities that are struggling to recruit, and there are courses that are struggling to recruit. That's a shame, but there are other ways to tackle that problem. If you take 18 and 19-year-olds in this country, 54 young women who are aged 18, in every 100 young women who are aged 18 or 19, 54 go to university, only 40 young men do. So if we could do better by boys' education, there'd be a lot more applicants for higher education. Or languages. The single biggest disciplinary problem we've got in the UK, in my personal opinion, is the collapse of language provision. Ever since languages became voluntary at Key Stage 4 GCSE, there's been a crisis in language learning, and it's still getting worse, and it means even big leading research-intensive Russell Group universities are struggling to have a really vibrant language offer. So if I had a plea to people in the room, you've probably all done this already, so we should all be engaging with Becky Francis's review of the 11 to 19 curriculum. Again, a very useful initiative that this government set up, because that is also due to report fairly soon, I think, Jacqui, and its recommendations. Becky is a wonderful person, and hopefully there'll be sensible recommendations, and hopefully the government will take them seriously.
Great stuff, thank you, mate. We've got time for a lightning round, and this guy, type to the front row, George, had flows.
Good. Thanks. Tim Smith here from Multiverse. I'm also sitting with the Digital Skills Council. I spend a lot of time thinking about data, mapping skills gaps, and trying to make predictions about the future of where demand for skills might be. And 6 months into Skills England being set up, there's been some really excellent analysis produced, but I think most people would agree we're not to the point where we have really accurate data around the scope of skills gaps across the country. And so my question to the university leaders on panelists, how you found engagement in Skills England so far, and whether you think there are more opportunities ahead. And to the Minister, it's really around the level of competence you have in the data that you have access to, and the way you're able to take decisions on the most.
Greg stuff, and that was following back George. You may call it at least two.
Hi, Jasmine Glynn from University of Arts London. I was just wondering on the maintenance grants announcement, is there a concern that maybe it's going to damage social mobility in courses that aren't deemed priority courses? Thank you.
Very good. I'll come to the rest of the panel. Give Jacqui a final word on this. Anything on this? Katerina? Rich?
So I'll come to the Skills England question. I think we need to do more. We need to work more closely. We need to listen. We need to connect. We need to work that ecosystem. But we've made a good start, and that work is informing our strategies. We refresh it. So it's informing the way we talk about it. It's informing the way we're going out to meet with our partners and to build those connections. So it's starting good work, but there is more to do. I absolutely accept that.
Yeah, very quickly on the maintenance thing. I mean, I share your concern. Our recent work on maintenance report suggested that to be fully involved in student life, students need something like £20,000 a year, and currently they're only getting, if they're getting the maximum loan in England, about £10,000 a year. So a huge gap there. I'm not suggesting government should fill in the entire gap. It's reasonable that students should do paid work during holidays, etc., etc. But what I want, one of the many things I want to know about the maintenance grant announcement is that additional cash into people's pockets, or will their loan entitlement be commensurately reduced, and how much extra cash will it be in student pockets?
So, first of all, Tim, on the Skills England, I think there is still a way to go with, and I know Phil Smith believes this as well, in the way in which Skills England are able to gain and use data, and I think there's, thank you for helping and working on that, because that's really important. Jasmine, we are, I think it would be fair to say that we're at an early stage of developing the maintenance grant policy, and, you know, I don't think anybody would be very surprised to know that Bridget would have announced more, and we've been able to announce more, i.e. higher amounts and broader and greater breadth. But bringing back maintenance grants into the system is a really important basis on which to build, and that's what we were very pleased that we were able to do instead.
Great, thank you. Well, let's call it there. Thank you very much, Jacqui. Before I give my final thanks, I do just want to flag the new report that Nick mentioned, actually, that this is a kind of pre-print version of Understanding Universities' Costs. What can track tell us, what the transparent approach to costing can tell us, the most sought-after report, just for the aficionados who really want to dig into track data. Lucky people have copies on their, some lucky people have copies on their chairs. Others, if you really want this, come and get some from the front. This does try to unpick what does track tell us about where does deficits come from, what's the future look like. So a key piece of work and be out in the next couple of weeks. So that's it from us. All I need to do now is to thank you for coming and sticking with us throughout this. Thanks to the Policy Institute team and ETF team for putting this together. Thanks to our amazing panel for their responses, and most of all, thank you to the Minister. Thank you, Jacqui Smith.